Hi there, I'm Martin Frohock. I'm the Global Director for Workplace at AbCam, and this is Unblocking Success.
Martin, good morning. Thank you for coming along to the Unblocking Success podcast. And it's lovely to see you at 8:30 in the morning.
Yeah, good fresh start. Thanks for having me.
Great fresh start. You're quite fortunate. You've had a couple of cups of coffee and I'm just 2 espressos down. So I'm sure we will muddle our way through this. I usually like to start at an easy place, which is right at the beginning. So perhaps if we kick off there, you explain who you are, your journey, where you've been, and we'll pick it up along the way.
Okay, cool. Martin Frohock. I am 41 years old these days.
Yep.
I know you didn't ask for a CV. I've been in Workplace for about 20 years in round numbers. I'm a Cambridge local, so I've been working in the UK most of my life. Started in healthcare. We're just talking about that. Moved into R&D. I've had a bit of a stint in aerospace, in food manufacturing, in engineering, and now I'm in the life science sector, back in the labs.
Yeah.
So pretty varied career, I'd say, in Workplace. Mostly facilities and operations. Done a little bit of CRE, done a lot of technology deployment over the years, and yeah, it's kind of a fairly varied career, so maybe dive into some of those jobs.
Yeah, sure. There's a lot to unpack there, right? So if we look at facility management, because this is something we were just talking a minute ago, I've yet to meet anyone that specifically or consciously dived into facility management as a career. I've probably yet to find anyone that's actually consciously gone into any career that's where they're in now. How did you land in facility management? How did that journey start to look?
Yeah, good point. That's, like we were saying, that's something that always surprises me. I mean, the industry is 120 billion when you combine it across Workplace, which is kind of equivalent to retail. If you look at supermarkets, 190 billion. Just amazes me that more people don't know about it, don't know how to jump into it. There isn't particularly well-established career paths. And as a result, like you say, most people fall into it or find a fairly organic way into facilities. I didn't though. I actually looked for a facilities management role before I knew what it was. So someone approached me. I'd been studying my degree in engineering. I'd had a stint in manufacturing. I'd done a lot of general operational leadership roles, I guess, in big FMCG companies. And I was fixing a production line one day, sweaty, all the tools at the top of an industrial pallet system. I can remember it now. Someone shouted at me and said, "Hey, I've seen this job over here. Do you fancy it?" And it was for NHS blood and transplant at the time. So public sector, they were just coming out of Department of Health and into NHS. So that was quite a big transition as well. Building lots of labs, building lots of blood processing laboratories. So quite an interesting technical role. And I just thought, why not? So I went for it, and that was the beginning, really. Yeah. But I always had FM in mind. I didn't, like I say, quite know what it was at the time. I didn't know what an interesting and diverse industry it was. But yeah, I always had the operational side, the technical side, the information management side, the customer-facing element to it, and obviously a big part of that managing outsourced partners. They ticked all the boxes for me and still do, really.
Yeah. The NHS government space.
Yep.
How do you find that? A lot of people I speak to and a lot of the companies that we kind of deal with as well, it could be at times a bit of a love-hate relationship with some of the processes. There's a massive oil tanker that you're trying to change at any one time, right?
Yeah.
When it does decide to change its direction. And obviously we often hear about it. It came out in the news recently as well, actually, about the state of disrepair for some of the units within the NHS estate. How did you find jumping into NHS?
I think I was lucky, actually, at the timing as much as anything. So, like I said, NHS BT as it is now was actually the National Blood Service, and it was funded by Department of Health at the time. So different sort of quasi-public sector. So lots of R&D funding in there. And I was initially based in Cambridge on the research park. So it was sort of half research and development and half healthcare. You had the best of both worlds. And when I joined, it was getting a massive amount of funding from Department of Health to rebuild the estate. So new commercial offices. We built Europe's largest blood processing laboratory in Filton in Bristol.
Wow. Right,
so
okay.
part of that project team. We were bringing in a CAFM system that was a new thing, a new project. It was my project, actually, for the NHS BT. So I think I was probably lucky. I was also lucky because the leadership at the time, we had a really well-established technical engineering function in there, some great people based up in Speke in Liverpool, and that was where the technical team worked out of. So I learned a lot from them. And again, timing, I was in my first role in FM, so what did I know? I was there to just be a sponge, really, and pick up from all of those guys.
Yeah. Do you find that many people kind of get into FM with a lot of technical experience, and then they're scrambling around trying to find the mentorship or the guidance and the leadership to try and help them along their way. What does that kind of look like for you?
Good question. I guess it depends on the industry. I think if you're in aerospace, which I can talk to, and engineering and fast-moving manufacturing, it is technical engineering. So it's more adaptable. It's easier to be in an FM role in those industries because you speak the same language. I think if you're talking, large-scale commercial real estate, it can be two different worlds almost. So I think that's the challenge. And like anything, I think you just have to be willing to learn and, have a broadness to you that you can jump into anything on any given day. The challenge is when you join thinking it's one thing, turns out to be something slightly different. If you don't adapt, it can be tricky. It's one of my favourite quotes, actually. It's Charles Darwin. It's not the strongest or the most intelligent of the species that survives. It's the species that adapts and changes. And I think there's a lot of truth to that in FM because there's been so much in 20 years. I've seen so much change thematically across what facilities is, the skills we have to learn, the things we do day to day. My day to day looks so different now to where I began back at the blood service.
What would you say some of the biggest changes are that have come in?
I think that lockdowns shifted the dial for workplace. I think the value proposition that we can bring, the breadth and sort of understanding across a business from a facilities management role was really understood. Can inform how our workplaces look, can inform the services that we bring in and how we can add value to a place. So it's, you probably heard there's a Leesman book that was written during COVID actually called The Workplace Why. I recommend anyone who hasn't read it to read it.
All right.
And it was really that, as workplace leaders, if you can't define why you have this space, which you invest multi-millions in over the year, then how do you expect the end users of your facilities to understand the purpose of the place? So it's really, that kind of resonated with me. And it's like, what value can we add? Why do we have this workplace? And taking the interest, across the teams to bring that to life, really.
How do you think COVID shaped the FM workspace? Do you think we've come out of that with a new mindset and a new version to approach in FM, or do you think it's made it worse? What do you think about that?
I think it's still quite muddled, actually. I think people are still finding their way, and that's not just individuals, that's businesses kind of adapting to it. And I'm not going to talk about the new normal, but I think to answer the previous question, what does a day look like? I spend the vast majority of my time looking at data, talking to super senior leaders, execs running the business around services, around is this landing, is that landing, what's the occupancy level this week, what can we do to shift the dial, what's the energy intensity of our estate, what's the next decision on this office in this location? Questions that I just wouldn't have had 5 years ago. The interest levels in what workplace is and what value we can bring, I just think has gone up exponentially. And I think it's important that we've not got all the answers, but we've got a foundation that can talk to the data side, can talk to the service side, can talk to our people. People-centric workplaces is kind of what it's all about. Otherwise, why do we have these spaces in the first place, right? And then really, we're going through an industrial revolution, over the next 10, 20, 30 years. So how can workplace play its part in that? How do we set ourselves up, for positive future, really?
Yeah, for sure. What kind of challenges do you see coming down the pipeline at the moment? Excuse the pun, terrible there. What challenges do you see kind of coming through over the next couple of years? Do you think AI is going to play that part of challenge, or do you think that's going to help the journey?
Good question. I think, and there's a lot of buzz around this, so I'll try not to go into buzzword bingo. If I go back 10 years again, I was sat around round tables talking to leaders in the industry about big data. And what the hell happened to big data? We had too much of it. No one knew what to do with it. No one could afford the software algorithms to make sense of it. So what have we done? We've kind of parked it. And it's still there. And some organizations are, fantastic in that space, don't get me wrong. But on the whole, that was a fad that came and went. I think the difference with AI is that, it comes in waves. We're in this early adoption mode at the moment, and we're seeing lots of cool applications. But when we get to AGI, general artificial intelligence, I think that's a game changer. I think the efficiencies that we see with, mathematical and engineering problems and how to solve some of our sustainability challenges, and how to make use of, facial recognition systems and biometrics and all of this, again, big data that we are creating. I think AI will be able to answer a lot of that for us. And then beyond that, when we get to, advanced models, that's a whole different world. And I'm not even going to try to answer that one, John. I think that's for others to talk to.
Yeah, for sure. Look, there's a lot, you hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of hype. There's a lot of buzzwords around it, right? And obviously there's that thing within the industry across the board where is it going to replace the work element, the human element to it? Will people need to be concerned about their job? Is the role they're in future-proof? Do you see any impact on that, or do you think that can be managed quite successfully?
Good question. I think about it a lot. I think I did a postgraduate course on AI because, again, evolving, learning. I
don't want to be extinct.
I didn't feel like I could hold a conversation without having some foundations. The reality is our roles are going to look totally different. The tools we use are totally different. If you look at our roles pre-computers, right, our roles are so different. Even, people like me and you who are traveling a lot, our world is in our phone, right? Our contacts, our tools, our cost modeling, our space plans, everything is in my pocket. If I have tools that are able to give me sensible data insights and show me what's happening in the marketplace, in my estate, in my contract performance, in people using the space as well, and the occupancy profile, if I'm able to do that at a really good defined level that makes sense to me, I'm looking at a totally different way of working again. A lot of the roles and sort of capabilities I have will be not redundant, but they'll look different. They will look different. I shouldn't use the R word. But that again breeds more new roles, right? To support, to understand. I think it also breeds more need for creative skills, for understanding and interpreting data, for knowing what to ask the kind of the model in the first place. I think a lot of those questions are yet to be answered, and I think that's what I mean by foundation blocks, is understanding where is this going to sort of blend into our way of working. Where can we lean into it nice and early to get the most benefit? And I do think it'll be through efficiencies initially, being able to answer questions quicker, being able to provide good data insights earlier, being able to model things like estate strategies and sustainability plans that at the moment take us hours and days to put together. In the future, it'll take us minutes.
I mean, admittedly, the introduction of even just some simple things like chatbots and so forth, right? They just streamline so much of the work processes. From my perspective, obviously from the service element, being the subcontractor or the contracted body, the supplier coming in to help as a service partner. Typically for us, I don't see the elimination of any roles. I just simply see the efficiency of those roles being pumped up to another level, right? You'll have a lot of people that will be able to just multitask or adopt more tasks throughout a day and be much more efficient at applying them. So I don't necessarily see there being a panic or worry, so to speak, on that front. But like you say, I think it's that evolution piece, isn't it? If you don't evolve, you do become extinct. And I think that's just in every particular industry, right?
It's back to that why question. It's thinking about why and where can this really make a difference. And I was reading last night, checking my numbers. If you read a book every day for the rest of your life, you might get to around 4 billion books. If you read for every second of every day of your life, you'd get to about 25 billion books. An AI engine can consume 8 trillion books, so 1,000 of your equivalent in a matter of 2 weeks. And that's today.
That's crazy.
That's the technology today. So when you think of that power of what these engines can do, it's so mind-boggling. I think I've been thinking about it for months on end, really. Where is this gonna hit first? How can we leverage it first? If I were to go and partner with an AI organization, what would I task them with from a workplace point of view? What problem are we trying to fix? And I've come to the conclusion that that's the wrong way to think about it. I think a lot of these tools will ultimately, and we've seen with DeepSeek last week, that wasn't a new AI tool. That's using and platforming across existing AI tools, making sense, doing more of the heavy lifting, but also using the power of existing AI tools. So I think we'll see a lot more of that. So APIs will be available to, people like CAFM system providers and service desk providers and energy managers and, and growth fund managers. And I think that's where we'll probably see it earliest.
Yeah, for sure. Let's hopscotch over to the people part of it, right? As we know, the title of the podcast, Unblocking Success. So, and
Love
that
it,
comes
by the way.
in, yeah, it's great, right? And that comes in multiple different elements. Success means so much to so many different people, whether that be on their career path, financially, or retention. There's so many elements to it. But you hit the nail on the head a moment ago, right? It's all about the people. Everything we do is all about our people. Have you noticed a change culturally with the generations that are coming through now? We often talk about this within work, for example. The generation of today, they're not like the generation of yesteryear, for example. The work ethic coming through for some people and so on and so forth. Do you notice a change with people coming into the FM industry, or do you think most people are landing in it pretty gun-ho and they know what they want to do straight out of the block?
It varies. I think you could... I'm always really wary of stereotypes and grouping, and there's a place for personas and Gen Z and Gen Y. There's a place for that. We've got some people got hundreds of thousands of employees we're trying to manage. So grouping and thinking around characteristics is really helpful, but I try not to. I try and take every individual as they come. If I think about my own team now, we've got young engineers who are hungry and are really every day, chasing down, where can I get to there? How can I get to that position? There's an impatience with the group, I would say, that perhaps I haven't seen that often in that area, in the engineering hard services side of things, for sure. I think that's a great thing. It's my role to feed that and to curate that and to provide opportunities and be the old guy in the room giving, steers and making connections and helping build networks and pointing at something that I think is probably higher value from a training point of view. So yeah, that doesn't scare me at all. I think I like to work at a fast pace, and the teams and businesses I work for are usually consistently pivoting and innovating in new areas. So because of that, I always feel like I'm running at a slightly different pace in a different gear to a lot of my peers. So because of that impatience, I'd say that's the key sort of feature I'm going for here, John, is that impatience is something that I think is easy to misinterpret because you want it now, everything's instant.
Do you think social media plays a part into that?
Oh, yeah, I think...
It's like that instant result piece.
100%. As we were saying before, I've got a 7-year-old girl who's not into social media just yet, but regardless, she is inherently always on. Yeah. There's always stimulus around her. There's always things going on. There's always inputs and outputs from all over, every direction. It's a much busier world that we're living in. And information is, literally in the palm of your hand every second of the day. And I think because of that, always on, there is an impatience to the world.
As a leader then, right, within your space, your sector, and over your career, how do you manage or guide people to get the best out of them when they have got this streak coming through them? Because I can resonate with that heavily. Great people, and I completely agree. There's nothing wrong with having a desire or want for more and that hunger to want it all yesterday. But it's developing that patience and that self-awareness and that ability to be able to say, okay, I do need to hold on a little while and to adopt some of what I'm being taught. But as a leader, how do you get that into people? What challenges do you find along the way there, and how do you overcome that?
I think you hit the nail on the head, actually, with self-awareness. I think that's where it starts. And I talk about myself. It took me a good 20 years to really feel like I understood the things I enjoy, the limits that I had at that point in time, and how to kind of grow on them and allow them to be powers rather than limitations. I think understanding where I was and where I wasn't, and what voice I had in the room, and perhaps where I needed to not contribute. That level of me and what I brought to the table took a while to curate. And I think you just got to help people with that. And there's loads of self-awareness tools out there. There's one that I like to promote, is the Squiggly Career Framework, which is kind of articulating where you're at, where you're not at, where your blind spots are, using the old 4-box Johari window. You plot where you're going. I think having conversations and reality checks along the way, not once a year because of annual review, but 2 monthly, 3 monthly, go for a walk outside, go, break the usual approach and get people, and everyone's different, and it's understanding those differences as a leader is where it starts, but get them into a situation, an area where you can have that real conversation. and then have that reality check and also just curate the self-awareness. Because the sooner you can get someone, I think, to that space where they understand where the blind spots are and where they're at, the easier it is to create opportunities for them to run at.
Yeah, definitely. What kind of challenges would you pluck out of your own career looking back in the early part where you go, perhaps I shouldn't have done that, or I was majorly impatient there, or are there any lessons or any examples you could give to people where that's happened to you, and maybe don't do that in your own career moving forward? Is there anything you'd rewrite?
I think so. I worked in the semiconductor industry for about 10 years. Started doing FM, started delivering projects, and then managed to grow into a global role. I think I was so in love with facilities management and what it was that I kind of prioritized that above all the other functions that I was dependent on. I hadn't realized in the early start of that role just how dependent I was on the other teams. So CRE, commercial real estate, obviously, and project side of things. I hadn't really appreciated how important those relationships were. So I didn't spend enough time, again, curating those, working on those, and really getting them strong and deep. And it was only when, we had a few hiccups in projects where that really becomes obvious, and you appreciate, the same humility I just talked about, the same self-awareness that I just talked about within the team that I'm leading now, I should have applied to my own career back in the day. I definitely do that now. I try to be a lot more empathetic. I think kids have taught me that. They have a way of doing that. I think learning from those failures, like everything, and reflecting and having back to that self-awareness has really helped me. And it was that, first probably 5 years of a 10-year span in semiconductors that, I probably made enough of those mistakes to realize, we need to do things a bit differently going forward.
What were some of the standout moments for you? And if you look back over your career, like for example, any roles of substance, so to speak, or real meaty roles where you've kind of been put into them and you go, what a milestone in my own career that I've been able to land on that. What were some of the highlight key moments for you up until now?
I've always tried to stretch myself a little bit, but not overstretch. And I've always tried to find something that I have transferable skills, and it's a leap, but not a, not a golf. And that's always served me quite well, actually. So I love my time at CR UK because it was a mixed bag of labs, complex research facilities, and also commercial real estate. Didn't do much of the retail there, but kind of looked after everything else with a small team. Then move into ARM, I think, and looking at the semiconductor R&D space and, huge global portfolio, high growth. I mean, that company was growing 60 people a week, week on week for 3 years.
Wow.
It was exponential growth that probably won't see again. And that brings with it lots of growing pains, lots of recruitment, lots of org design and, reshaping the team. And when I was referring to pivoting earlier, that ARM was just a fantastic organization for that and for challenging you in every function to innovate and be cutting edge and bleeding edge. And I think I learned probably more in that 10-year stint at ARM than I've learned, cumulatively in the rest of my career. And now in AbCam, doing antibodies, not me, obviously, but facilitating the environment where we research and manufacture antibodies. I think everyone has taught me something different. And actually, when I'm looking for roles and looking for a change and a new challenge, I honestly look for learning opportunities. So I like to think that I've earned my badges in facilities, and that's evergreen. You have to keep changing that. You have to keep topping up your knowledge. It never stops, like we said earlier. But at the same time, I think I know the industry. I've got good telephone book, so to speak, and a good network. I know my way around FM, but it's not about that. It's then about the organisation and what can you provide as value add, and what can it teach you in order to make you more impactful going forward.
Have you found any? This is a word that does get pushed around quite a bit, but I can resonate with it at periods. Right, imposter syndrome. Have you ever felt that coming through on any of these roles?
Apart from today, watching the other podcast on the train over. Every role actually. If I look back, I think I grew up in a big family. I was the youngest, the runt of the litter. You sort of find a way of finding your place and how you fit, but also create growing that voice, and that builds a certain type of confidence that I've always been quite lucky to have. I think so. I'll always back myself, but that doesn't stop the imposter syndrome.
How'd you silence it? How'd you keep that down? Do you find that through sport? Because we were just talking a moment ago off air, right? You're like incredibly sporty. do you find that helps to kind of channel a little bit of that, to like declutter the mind, as it were? Or do you find another avenue for it? How do you conquer that?
How do I conquer that? I think it's just
into it.
What's the worst that can happen, right? I may have the odd dodgy social media podcast video out there. Yeah. I may have the odd blemish on my CV, but I think you're a long time alive, and I'm probably halfway through my career, right? So I'm sure I'll make loads more mistakes as I go forward, and it's just not being afraid of those, really. The imposter syndrome doesn't go away. I sit in rooms with CEOs and CFOs who could talk rings around me in lots of ways. Yep. But I'm the workplace guy. I got a seat at the table. Yep. I think it's really important for FMs to not devalue themselves, because we've got such a voice. There's so many elements of the business, whether it's cost savings, if that's your flavor, or strategy and location, or services and what our colleagues are saying day to day. Surprising in big organizations, the lack of understanding, especially with a high turnover of new people coming in and out. Yeah. I think there's a solidity and quality of information that comes through from facilities and real estate that people don't always value. And I just think, I've got something to add here. I think you just power through with the confidence that I have a voice, I have a value. Not every meeting it's going to be the number one in the room. Not every meeting you're even going to get a word in edgeways, to be frank. But it's just being okay with what you can do rather than what you can't. Lean into your strengths rather than perhaps the gap.
Yeah, sure. I'm interested in the 10-year part you just mentioned there at ARM, about that. That is exponential growth. 60 people on a weekly coming through. Yeah. How do you keep up with the pace of change in an environment like that? That's huge.
Well, that's the question. I mean, the truth is, I probably couldn't have kept it up for another 10 years.
Yeah.
I think despite my efforts, it was a truly unique environment. I'm really fortunate to work there and to work with the brilliant people. We had a cracking team. We had best-in-class real estate people, best-in-class construction people, best-in-class facilities people, I like to think. And we did an incredible job with the facilities we opened, some beautiful estate in every region of the world. So I'll always be super grateful for that period. I think keeping on top of it, a lot of it is down to that network within the business and being as close, ear to the ground as much as you can. Where we're going to grow next? Where's the challenges? What's worked in the estate in the last year? What hasn't worked? Having that really good network of professionals in region, recruiting right every time. I think, I'd like to think everyone we recruited in that 10-year span really added something to the team.
Is there any characteristics or attributes when you are recruiting that you specifically try to pull through? I appreciate different roles are going to require different skill sets, but are there any kind of fundamental baseline attributes that underpin someone's character that you're looking for in general?
Good question. There was a few, I probably won't talk about them because they've probably changed since I left, but there was a few core values in ARM that really resonated. And I hate it when organizations say, oh, you're this fit or that fit, because of course, to your point, you need diversity, you need, you make better decisions when you do have a diverse resource pool. But there's a few in ARM. So hold strong opinions lightly was one of my favorite ones. So you're expected to have a loud voice, a strong opinion, to know your stuff. But don't be afraid of being challenged. We encourage that, right? Yeah. That was one of the ARM values that I like to really pinch loved.
The Simon Sinek saying, right? If it's a great idea, it can withstand criticism.
Exactly. Yeah, so, there was lots of that. Yeah. And you couldn't be afraid of that, actually. And that was to my point earlier about maybe some of the conflict that I saw early on was because I did hold strong opinions too strongly. But you soon learn that. And that was something I looked for was, is someone additive to the team? That was number one. And in the early days, I definitely recruited people because I felt, they were the right fit at the time, but I didn't think about the wide team. Is this person going to add to the capabilities of the team? Are they going to help, cross-regionally as well? Don't think narrowly about that site, that operation, that region. Think globally and across the whole team. Is that person additive? That was probably number one for me, because you're building a tool chest to deal with whatever's coming down the line in 5 years. And if you're the leader and you don't know what's coming down the road in 5 years, something's gone wrong. So, it's an equation between what's going to come and where we're at today. and what skills, what capabilities, what knowledge, what character is going to really add to it. So whether it was someone who understood employee experience because we were heading out of COVID and we need to have a good dialogue with colleagues to understand what was going on in the sites, whether it was a technology leader to deploy IoT devices to generate the data to give insights on what's happening in the footprint, a real estate professional who we knew who was going to make lots of transactions in the next few years. I think you just have to have ear to the ground and think about what's additive, and also just be open-minded about that diversity. So I wouldn't say there are any other characters really, John, I look for, but I think the contribution to the wider team was the key thing in that time.
So your title now, Global Workplace Director. Give us a snapshot of what a day in the life of you looks like now.
So AbCam, first off, we're an antibody company. I said I wouldn't talk about it or promote AbCam, but it's worth explaining what we do. So antibodies, for anyone that doesn't know, Y-shaped protein that has antigens, and the antigens can be trained to attack chemicals and attack viruses, for example. So we have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of customers, from one lab technician in an R&D function to NGOs to healthcare providers across the world. And the interesting part with that is we develop, integrate, and then manufacture these antibodies, as well as reagents and other things, binding agents that go to market with the antibodies. And we do that globally across every corner of the world. That's the interesting part, is fairly small organization, 1,800 people in round numbers, and yet we try and deliver antibodies within the next couple of days to every corner of the world. So we have logistics hubs and supply chain hubs. We have manufacturing facilities, R&D facilities, and then commercial offices all over the world. I think our furthest east is Adelaide, probably. And then our furthest west is probably just Eugene in Oregon. And we have 11 sites in between. So trying to manage that is obviously 24/7. I have a brilliant team. I have 3 regional leaders that run the facilities day to day. And we have a hybrid model of service providers and on-site technicians and engineers and lab support as well, which is a slightly unique part to the role. So day to day could be like in any role, right? Absolutely anything. Probably spend a decent amount of my time thinking about footprint and keeping real estate events in check and keeping ahead of them, so leaders can make decisions on where we grow, where we shrink, where we do something slightly different, and try not to have any gotchas as a result of that. Sounds simple, but when you're part of a big group like the Danaher Group, we were acquired in late 2023. It creates loads of opportunities and lots of extra work to look at the right thing to do with our real estate to make the right decision. So I spend a lot of my time in that space thinking about the footprint strategy. A lot of the time just talking to colleagues, really, talking to associates in other departments, what's going on, where's the need, how do we need to look at the space allocation in this space, how can I give you data to make decisions on what you do with your equipment. And if I'm honest, it's doing what I've always done, but doing it on a global scale, which brings with it lots of different challenges. It brings different markets, different service provider models in region, different language and cultural barriers that you need to understand and kind of work through.
And again, as a leader, as a manager, dealing with those elements there, look, the challenges are blaringly obvious, but how do you deal with those? Have you noticed there are certain attributes or skill sets, etc., that you have to adopt and apply to be able to successfully run sites in different corners of the globe? How do you function your time around all of that? I think that'd be quite an interesting thing to explore.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've cracked the time thing, even after 6 years of managing global teams in ARM and the last few years in AbCam. But I mean, I turn the mirror on myself. Actually, it's less about what the team can do and the skills and attributes. It's more about me and making sure, again, back to being additive. I still feel that need when I'm talking to colleagues in region, regardless of what project's going on or what we're talking about on any given day, for me to add something, to contribute something, to really give something to that interaction, right? So I think the team a lot of the time come to me for leadership on data strategy, technology strategy, things that I kind of know my way around. They don't need help with me negotiating a new lease in Beijing. Just most of the time just need, okay, numbers look sensible. I agree with your approach. Let's go. And so I think them understanding what value I can add, me, recruiting and building that team where obviously I understand what they can bring and add, adding them all together and making sure you're able to turn your hand to anything in any region is really key to making that work.
Yeah.
And then the regional thing, I love to travel out of work. I've got a kind of hunger for that, I think. And
how do you balance that with the home life?
Not very well.
Yeah.
Not very well. I'm getting to a stage now where we're going on holiday with the family, to all the spots that I travelled with work whilst I was at Arm, which is quite nice actually, because you look through one lens when you're travelling for work, you look through a totally different lens when you're thinking about a 7-year-old and a 2-year-old. So I kind of take it in my step. AbCam are brilliant in terms of making it as comfortable as I can travel wise, and don't have to take up my whole weekend traveling, for example. But you're always on anyway, right? Yes, that's the reality. Is I've always tried to over deliver. I think that's where it starts. So I'm coming here, I've taken a couple of hours out of the day to come and record a podcast and talk to you to promote facilities as an industry. That's what this is all about. But I'll give some back. I'll give some extra back throughout the week. I'll be working whilst I'm on my turbo trainer probably tomorrow night. I think, again, that healthy balance and trying to make sure that I'm always over giving a bit more than I take. I think that's really how I balance it in the round. And just not going into weeks with any preconceived notions of what it's going to look like. You have a plan. You plan for absolutely every opportunity or every example of what could happen, and then you just appreciate that something will happen that will screw it up, something will happen that will change the plan. Just be okay with that. Just be at peace. Things get thrown at you, don't they? Day to day, and you just got to roll with it. I've got that. I think that's one thing in my chest that I don't mind that. I just tend to roll with it. When you're the runt of the litter in a family, you tend to get what you're given.
Your way through. For sure.
And I've definitely carried that on. Anyone that's been in facilities for more than a couple of years, that's the first thing they say, right? Why do you love facilities? Because every day is different. And I think if you go into that with whether it's travel or collaborating with people cross-regionally, you're less, you're not put off your stride as easily as perhaps someone who's gone in with a fixed idea of what they're going to get out and a fixed idea of how to approach a certain situation. You just have to be adaptable.
In your mind, the progression path within facility management, is that quite clear within the industry for people to look at progression? So, for example, people might go in, I'm now thinking from my own personal view, for people that I've spoke with and I deal with on a daily basis, again, multiple different levels dependent on the size of the organisation. Some have layers for layers for layers, right? And it's very clear within some of the bigger organisations that kind of progression path to go through. And then you flip the coin and you go the other route and you look towards other kind of hard FM services and so on, where they might be looking after a estate or a block or a building. And they themselves you can see the frustration. You can't necessarily see how they're looking to move on up. It literally looks like they just need to hopscotch over to another company to kind of do that, right? From your opinion, progression path within facility management, is it clear or can it be a squiggly line?
It can definitely be a squiggly line. In fact, I think it should be a squiggly line a lot of the times, because facilities looks different taste in every organisation, every sector. So, having an entirely vertical career path might not ground you so well when you want to flip industries, or you want to try something different in an alternative sector. I think it's a real shame, and that's a big part of doing things like this, really, John, is I think there's so many misinterpretations of what facilities and workplace is. There's so many misunderstandings of what the right jump in point is into workplace and into facilities, because it's so broad. It's almost too broad when you look across all the sectors, all the industries, all the functions, all the skills within facilities. Where the hell do you start? And I think that's the biggest problem, is the entry level development between things like, have you heard of the T-level model? It's not big actually in workplace and FM. I think it should be. That's one thing I'm kind of advocating for. It's big in STEM. So if you're in science, technology, you want to most people seem to want to do kind of pathology degrees these days, watching too much CSI maybe.
Yeah.
And that's great, because that, for AbCam, in the lab side of things, is a great pathway in. We do pathology, we do histo and things like that. That's a good entry point to get someone in at foundation level, so work experience, then back into sixth form, then back into T levels, then an apprenticeship degree level, and then you're off. You're an entry level lab scientist at that point. I think that's a really nice. It's not fully mature. It's only been a thing within the last 10 years or so. But I can really see how those points in a career path stitch together, and how someone could end up being a senior scientist in AbCam in 10 years, having started at that vocational level. Weirdly, I can't see that pathway for workplace and facilities. It's really murky for me, because there's so many jump-off points into workplace. And I think that's the problem. So I think role modeling and talking through career paths for leaders, and to do that more and more and more, and to just look for these opportunities where, okay, we can develop that T-level path over there. What do they do next? It's all about the next step, isn't it?
Yeah.
And how can you create that and curate that? I just think we can do a lot more. But I would just encourage anyone that's thinking about a career in workplace or facilities to just do it. Be curious about everything every day. Learn. Like, it's all about, there's so much to learn, whether it's engineering, data science, real estate strategy, service provision, service and community driven stuff, like employee experience. There's so much to it. And I think that's somewhat the problem, actually, is you don't know where to start from a framework point of view.
Yeah.
So my advice is jump in, be inquisitive, learn your ass off, and you could do anything.
Yeah. From a mentoring perspective, do you think mentorship plays a key role? Or it feels like not enough people, from my experience, have dedicated people that they can go to outside of the workplace, for example, right? And in my own career, I can think of people within the charity sector and so on that have played pivotal roles within my own career, nothing to do with the space I occupy, but hold positions at high levels that have been able to offload and kind of spitball and chew the fat on different ideas and ways of looking after teams or growing an organization and so forth. How important do you feel that mentoring and mentorship is?
I think it's really important. Regardless, quite long in the tooth now, but I certainly have half a dozen people, 3 probably in the sector, 3 that, like you said, John, random in terms of what they can provide, but all 6 adding value, people I can bounce off, people I can talk through a particularly challenging issue that I'm facing. And actually, I think it's a really healthy thing to have mentors outside of the sector, because I think, if you stick one track, then, your potential for learning is narrowed slightly. I think the bigger gap in which you have to jump, that's where the learning is, right? That's where you fall the furthest, but great, you learn the most through those failings. Yeah, I think there's a big place for general leadership mentoring, especially if you're in your first role, especially first time manager, and a lot of people in facilities are these days. But then the technical leadership within workplace and facilities, I think there's so many opportunities, but with such a busy sector, we're so heads down, day to day, getting stuff done, that sometimes we don't create the space for people to come up and build their network, and talk and write papers and do thought leadership and just really, widen their knowledge. I don't think we create enough of that space. And because, to my last point, there isn't this really strong, really prescriptive career path, you don't create the space for people to go away and continue that learning either. So, IWFM and IFMA do I think a really good job of creating, working groups that come together, similar-minded people in the industry, but, cross-sector. I think we can just do more and more of that.
Yeah. Let's take a quick look towards people coming straight out of school or education and trying to get into the sector in particular. And again, if you can learn from the mistakes of others, then you're in a great position, right? If you were going to kind of look back at your career up until now, and as you say, possibly at the halfway mark within your career, lessons learned so far along that journey that you might impose onto other people coming through into the space?
I'm still learning. Every day I'm still learning. I think taking the time to reflect as often as you possibly can, and then in between times bouncing that off of a mentor, a line manager, a leader within the business, I think is really key. So, I don't believe in, ask for feedback at the end of this, ask for feedback. just ask for feedback all the time. It should be always on. Your feedback radar should always be on. And that doesn't matter what age, how long you've been in the sector. So, yeah, I think I get on people's nerves, right? I'm always asking for feedback. And it's not asking my VP or my line manager for feedback. It's guys that are working for me. Did that land well? Was that clear enough? Did that make sense? Could I have done that a bit differently? I think that's where I've learned the most, right? Is again, back to that self-awareness and listening and being okay with things can always be better, because they can. Lessons I've learned though would be, don't over focus on the next role in your sort of line of sight, because sometimes by the time you get there, the dials have switched. The sector is still such a fast moving sector. If I think about 15 years ago, everyone was collecting health and safety certificates and diplomas and doing their new Bosch. That was the thing. Like, this is the new theme running through the industry. Then it was environmental controls and energy management. Now it's technology. Then it was IoT. Now it's AI. Like, where do you start? Each of those four things I just mentioned, they're careers in their own rights. They are areas that you can, go off for 4 years and become a specialist in. And I think ultimately you need to choose. Do I want to be, narrow and deep? That technical leader? Do I want to be wide and brief, as in shallow? So do lots of different things and be able to kind of bring them together. I've taken the approach to do both, is dive in certain things that really pique my interest, that I think is either new and there's not a load of people that can talk to it, or that will be a game changer in 5-6 years' time. But have a broadness to everything else. So keep your eye on what's happening in the service provision space. Keep an eye on what's happening in the data and technology space. Keep an eye on the CAFM sector. Keep an eye on this. Keep an eye on the digital side of things. Keep an eye on people space and HR. Like, all those things that we need to understand to be effective at our role. I've taken, that's been my journey, and the lesson, I think, is don't go too deep too early. And that's the balance. Ultimately, you need a bit of both, I think. Some people will choose to go deep and become technical specialists and have fantastic careers as technical leaders. It's just not been my journey.
Your journey so far.
So far.
Yeah, so far.
This time.
Right. I guess really last kind of question from me. If you were going to reflect back now and have a sit-down conversation with the 16-year-old version of yourself, and give them some advice, what would that look like? What would you say to a 16-year-old version of you?
Okay, 16-year-old Martin didn't sit down.
Yeah. Well, the standing jumping
41-year-old Martin doesn't sit down very often, apart from doing things like this. And actually, that's probably would be my advice, would be to somehow channel that energy a bit earlier. I think I had a lot of useless energy nice and early on, and like a lot of perhaps young men needed to get rid of it. Took me a while to find it, and I honestly think that facilities for me was where I found it, because it is so broad and there's so many points in which you can go off on a journey and learn. And I'm super lucky. I get to use my energy up on travel and technical projects and collaborating across the business and talking to multiple people every day, inside and outside of the business. I just, honestly, so lucky. But that takes a lot of energy, ultimately. I think, back in the day, I definitely didn't use my energy in the most productive way. And I probably could have got to where I wanted to a little bit smoother, I would say. But again, no regrets. So I try not to have too many conversations with a 16-year-old. I just think it's a shame. And it's not about me. It's about, the team I have now and the team that will come kind of after me. I think it's a shame that we as an industry don't create enough opportunities at that point, at that key point in someone's development, that they can jump into workplace. I'm a STEM ambassador on the side, so to speak. I've got a daughter, and I remember seeing a statistic that by the age of 12, 80% of STEM, science, technology, and engineering students are female. By the time you get to 17, it drops to 20%. So that fall off just shocked me, and it's getting better and better. That was the statistic when I initially started. It's getting better and better. But I think if you did something similar for facilities, there'd be a similar cliff in which people come into the industry and ultimately find another route out. And I really would like to attract it, promote it as a real, just amazing industry. I can't think of a better job, to be honest, sitting here. And I'd really encourage anyone to just to just jump in and stay in.
Yeah.
Because it's an exciting journey.
Yeah. Filled with challenges in itself.
Oh, yeah.
Along the way. But I think, listening back to this, anyone that has listened in on this or watched this on one of the social channels will all agree. I think the common theme running through this is having the patience, having the self-awareness, as you mentioned there, having your feedback monitor switched on loud and clear and looking for the opportunities at every single step of the way. Would that be a fair assumption?
Definitely, 100%.
Yeah. Martin, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come on down to meet with us today.
Pleasure.
It's been a pleasure speaking to you. And lastly, if people did want to try and find you, hunt you down and pick your brain on something, where could they possibly find you?
LinkedIn's usually easiest.
LinkedIn, your best
Ping
place.
me on LinkedIn, as you know. Keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
Day to day.
And then off we go, yeah?
Yeah.
Martin, thank you so much for coming on down.
Thanks, John.